Hello everybody, the biggest drug lord ever, the man who got the USA hooked on cocaine and built Colombia's largest underground empire. He had political ambitions and dreamed of the presidency, plunging his country into chaos and terror. The brutal and ruthless king of cocaine swam in luxury most of his life and had his own prison with a casino and hookers. This man was a cult hero of common people and one of the 7 world's richest people, spending $2,500 on rubber bands needed to hold stacks of his cash. Yes, it's all about Pablo Escobar and his daring and violent life. This all began with Hermilda Gaviria, a teacher who gave birth to her son on December 1st, 1949. His father was Abel de Jesus Escobar Echeverri. Who could have thought that in 31 years their baby would control 80% of the world's cocaine market? Pablo's childhood was spent on the streets, where boys used to listen to stories where the protagonists were the legendary Colombian banditos. At the age of 12, his family moved to the neighboring town of Envigado. There, young Pablo played truant and smoked marijuana, so he was expelled from school. His criminal life began with stealing and reselling gravestones. Later, he started selling cigarettes and marijuana and forging lottery tickets. Afterward, the guy formed his gang to steal cars. Racketeering added up to this list later. In 1971, Escobar's gang kidnapped Diego Echevarrio, a successful and hard-hearted businessman. The gang demanded a hefty ransom from his family, but they never got the money. The kidnappers then strangled their victim and dumped his body in the municipal landfill. In the early 70s, Pablo turned his attention to the booming cocaine industry in the USA. Having understood the enormous amount of money involved, he became an intermediary. He used to buy cocaine cheaper and sell it at a higher price. Thus, by 22, Pablo had gained fame as Medellin's biggest criminal mastermind. After that, he had never parted with cocaine for the rest of his life. By 1977, Pablo teamed up with the 3 strongest competitors and created the notorious Medellin cartel. This cartel owned almost all of the cocaine market in the United States. Escobar's cruelty was legendary. Anyone who took a chance to take some cocaine out of Colombia unknown to the country's chief drug lord was likely to be killed. Every producer of white powder was obliged to sell it to Escobar's people for 25–30% commission. 2 years after the Medellin cocaine cartel was established, Forbes estimated the drug lord's fortune at $47 million. Sometimes Escobar's one-day revenue day reached $420 million. A secret of the incredible success of Escobar's empire was the endless bribery of law enforcement officers and officials. Everyone has a price. The important thing is to find out what it is, Pablo used to say. Indeed, he could buy everyone. The entire military unit of 43 surgeons and 5 officers was involved in transporting equipment for the Medellin cartel's drug lab. They were commanded by a captain who had passed a boot camp with drug dealers. Well, Escobar either intimidated or killed those who was reluctant to cooperate. His favorite motto was the phrase "plata o plomo," Spanish for silver or lead. Escobar managed to launder most of his money through sponsorship of the Atlético Nacional soccer team. The criminal was notedly passionate about soccer, and he used to invest lots of money in building pitches and the rest of the soccer infrastructure. Pablo used his cocaine money to build roads, volleyball and basketball courts, soccer fields, schools and churches. This way, Escobar wanted to have the air of Robin Hood, helping the poor. Pablo also owned 30 estates, 40 rarity cars, and 500,000 hectares of land. Having gained fabulous wealth, the king of cocaine turned to the dream of his childhood. He wanted to become a president. Perhaps Pablo would have eventually achieved that goal if he hadn't made a bitter enemy in 1984. That was Rodrigo Lara Bonilla, who managed to prove that drug money had been invested in Escobar's campaign. After that, the drug lord was forced to say farewell to his political dreams. In 1985, the United States finally decided to strike at the man who used to poison their entire country. They agreed with the Colombian government that they should catch the main drug lord and hand him over to them. In response, Escobar created a terrorist group called Los Extraditables to hunt down law enforcement officers, journalists, judges, and officials. The terrorists killed half of all judges and 500 law enforcement officers in just 2 years. Once, the bandits blew up a passenger plane with 107 people on board. Even pulling all his strings and spending lots of money, the kingpin couldn't cancel the extradition law and had to hide from the authorities in multiple hiding places in Colombian cities. Just like Escobar, his family was hiding. Once on the run, they had to overnight in an open field with no wood to make a fire. That's where Pablo started to burn his money. This night took him several $1,000,000 to burn, but this kept his family warm. "I can replace things, but I could never replace my wife and kids," the drug lord used to say. About to be run down like an animal, Escobar went back to his old ways of kidnapping. His man kidnapped some of Colombia's richest people, counting on their powerful relatives to overhide the extradition. So what? He managed to do it. But in return, he had to turn himself in and go to jail. Honestly speaking, you couldn't dream of the prison conditions like his in your normal life. Pablo built an entire building for himself, which turned out to be better than any 5-star hotel. The huge grounds included a swimming pool, a soccer field, gardens, waterfalls, and a barbecue area. And the most interesting thing is that Escobar began to be seen in the stands of the stadiums. They sometimes let the drug leave his prison to cheer for his favorite soccer teams. Therefore, his arrest caused no problem for his business. The Colombian government was willing to make any concessions until he started killing people in jail. Eventually, the authorities decided to transfer the king of cocaine to a regular prison. Upon learning of this, Pablo went on the run. But you can hardly call it running away. The guards let him out through the central gate. Escobar, an all-time fugitive, took the news of the collapse of the Medellin cartel surprisingly well. Upon learning of this, he once again changed his place of residence and settled in Los Olivos, one of the Medellin's neighborhoods. Pablo Escobar, this brutal murderer and drug dealer, died because of his sentiments and love for his family. By the time of his death, he had long been wanted. Pablo understood the danger of every communication with his family. So he did not get in touch with them for over a year, but he couldn't stand it, and one day after he turned 44, called his family. The intelligence services tapped the phone and were constantly waiting for that call. The drug lord only talked to the family for 5 minutes, and that was enough to track him and find his location. Special forces surrounded the house in no time, and the gunfight began. Soldiers broke down the door and Escobar was killed by snipers' shots. A little bit later, his son would tell journalists that Escobar shot himself once he realized he had no way to escape. We don't know what happened in reality, but anyone who wanted to be photographed next to Pablo's body lying on the roof did it. These photos later became the property of the world. Escobar was buried on December 3rd, 1993. More than 20,000 of his compatriots came to mourn him. The unruly crowd simply swept away those who were carrying the coffin with the body. Everybody wanted to touch the dead face of the Colombian legend in goodbye. Grown-up Escobar's children changed their names, way too dishonorable to have, and migrated to Argentina. But to this day, there is a version in Colombia that on December 2nd, 1993, the double died instead of the ambitious criminal, while Escobar underwent plastic surgery to enjoy life in a luxury resort thus far.